We're just verifying that we actually are indeed live. 1 second here before we start talking. I do believe that there is a slight delay in the communication from the States over to the UK with regards to me talking to Tony. So please bear with us with that. We've been trying to work through it and some other technical issues. So again, welcome everybody at home. Well, let's just do a massive introduction to a person who actually doesn't really need any introductions, but we'll do it anyway. Originally from Mancot, Wales, Tony started his career at Burnley before moving to Hull in the 1980-81 season. Tony will go on to play 372 games for the Tigers, and to this day holds a record for 226 consecutive appearances between August 83 and September 88. As part of Hull City's centenary celebrations in 2005, a poll was carried out to name the top 100 Tigers, and Norman was the highest placed goalkeeper at number 6. During his time at Boothby Park, Hull completed a swift climb up the 4th division to the 2nd. In 1986, they finished 6th, the second highest finish at the time. They finished 5th in 1971, until they finally won promotion to the top flight 22 years later. His career really took off when he joined Sunderland. I was always going to say that. In the 1988-9 season, for what was then a club record fee of £500,000. Imagine that now. Where we at here? A deal that saw Ian Hesford and Billy Whitehurst go the other way. So that was an interesting fact for you. I've got a little bit of an issue with my screen here. As I'm sure most of you know, during his time with the Black Cats, he helped them win promotion to the top flight in 1990, and he also played at Wembley in the 1992 FA Cup final, as you just saw there. Fantastic game. He played a starring role in the Cup run, including man of the match displays away to West Ham and at home to Chelsea. He remains the only goalkeeper to have played for Sunderland at Wembley twice. I'm not even sure that's true now. It was actually, I think McLaughlin's played twice now. So you were the only goalkeeper. Norman left Sunderland in the summer of 1995 after making some 227 games, signing for Huddersfield Town, where he would go on to play his final 2 seasons of his career. Tony made 5 international appearances for Wales, making a total of 670 appearances over a 20-year career. Tony, I want to thank you again for joining us today.
Absolutely no problem, Degsy. Good to see you, mate, even though it's only on screen. Before you start, just a very quick hello to a lad called Kevin Garrett, who I believe is watching now. All right, mate.
I'd heard that he was your biggest fan, Tony. So it's quite impressive to have him log on, and he's your biggest fan, apparently. So anyway, Tony, so what are you up to these days?
At the minute, I can honestly say I'm sort of virtually now retired. Over the last, 4 or 5 years, I've had spells at various football clubs, like the lower leagues. Darlington, Blythe Spartans, I did a spell, Gateshead, York City. And alongside that, I was doing sessions for young goalkeepers on a one-to-one basis. But over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, I've gradually pulled away from it and just eased work commitments. I had a couple of things back in my home in North Wales, where family is still living. We had a few things to sort out, which I needed a bit of space, really, away from commitments to be able to do it. So now, especially with this virus doing the rounds, it's things are pretty quiet, and I'm fine with that, to be honest.
Well, I want to take you back to, and thank you for that. I'm going to take you back to the start of your career. So when you first started playing, where did you draw your inspiration?
To be perfectly honest, my first recollections of football were when I was around about 8 years old. And that was the time, that was, 1966. I mean, I can remember watching the World Cup final as a boy with my dad and my brothers. I can remember watching the FA Cup final the same year where Everton played Sheffield Wednesday. Both games finished 4-2. Everton winning one and England won the other one. But with regards to football out in the street and the professional game, were miles apart in my head. You couldn't even really compare. Our game was putting the shirts in the road to make the goalpost, going out and playing, kicking a ball, or going up to the park, you know. So I didn't really cling on to anybody at that age, goalkeeping wise, and say, I want to be able to do that, you know. I just really just tumbled into football gradually as the years went on.
So was there a player that, with that in mind as well, was there a player when you started to actually get involved in training? Was there a player that you tried to emulate, someone that actually you did look up to? I know you mentioned there that at the, you know, when you first started off, but when you started actually getting into that regime, was there a player that you actually looked up to and wanted to be like, or even tried to emulate some of their abilities?
I think there's a couple of things on that line of question. One, when I was about 16 years old, and I was quite lucky in it because the local team to where I live is Chester, funnily enough, which is 7 miles away from where I live in North Wales. So I used to go and watch Chester, and the goalkeeper there was a lad called Grenville Millington. And he used to run or help run one of the local youth teams. And one day, when I was 16 years old, he knocked on the front door and he said, "Would you come and sign for my team?" Which I did. So when you talk about looking up to somebody, he was the first person who I knew was a professional footballer. And I used to go into training an hour before the outfield players and work with him doing the goalkeeping drills, if you like, for want of a better word. So he gave me ideas. It was a great learning experience. He gave me little ideas, not only the training, the handling, and moving your feet things, but he used to put thoughts in my head. Have you ever thought of this? Try that. And I did. So I learned. Of course, my career went on, and then you're working, playing against goalkeepers. And the one goalkeeper, the way it worked out was bizarre. I used to like the way Neville Southall played. And he was a Welsh lad. I was born and bred in Wales. And of course, Neville was Welsh. He played for Everton, one of the teams my brothers and myself followed as young lads. And I didn't even think at the time, but I ended up working alongside him when I managed to get in the Welsh squad. But I used to look at the way he went about the game, how he came across in the dressing room. So he taught me so much over the 6 years I knew, and it's something I didn't try and emulate because every goalkeeper is different. Everyone, some have got strengths at this, some's got strengths at the others. But I like the way he carried himself. I like the way he prepared. I loved things like that. So yeah, when you talk about emulating anybody, he was the player I sort of looked up to and thought, oh, I'm going to carry those ideas with the way I was going. You know.
Yeah, for sure. I forgot to mention at the start of this, Tony, we had this chat that's open live as well. So we'll have people that are feeling questions throughout or even comments. There's a comment on there from your Phil already mentioning about that you've got your posh shirt on. Oh, he's on like.
See, now
And
that's why if I ever see if that's why, Degsy, between me and you, if I ever go to the States to see you lot again, he ain't coming.
that's fair enough. And David Rush has posted on here as well. He said that you were like his footballing dad, he said. I'm sure.
Amazing, really. I watched the second half of the game, the Chelsea game, like you had on the other week, and I've
Yeah.
just watched the highlights of the Norwich game, and you forget, you forget how young the players were, the likes of Rushy, top lad, and the way they went into them games without a fear in the world. A great example. It was a question of they just went out and played. You didn't have to say
Yeah.
anything to them. You didn't have to guide them. Great young lads who did great for the club.
That's class. So you signed from Hull in 1988. How did playing for Sunderland compare to playing for Hull City?
Um, they obviously, there was some comparisons. One, Boothry Park, Hull City's old ground. It was one of them grounds where you went in, the stand was old, the corridors were old, but there was a family spirit within the club. Everybody knew everybody, you know, the people that did the kit, everybody got on, they mixed, the physio, fantastic. When I moved to obviously Roker Park as it was then, you got the feeling it was exactly the same. It was, yeah, no, it wasn't a new stadium, but it had, when you walked in, it had a feel of it, a feel of its own, if you like. Very homely. Everybody, you knew everybody by name in the offices, the ticket offices. Everybody mixed in. It was the way it was. The difference, I think, the best way I can describe a difference is when I actually signed for Sunderland. And one of the difference that struck me straight away, when we finished the game at Hull City, you'd come out under the stand and there'd be the Hull Daily Mail newspaper reporter, and he'd be waiting for you. And hello, Tony, can you just give us a quote on this? And yeah, great, Dave. You know, no problem. Everything all right. Catch you later. And then I signed for Sunderland, and I was in Dennis Smith's office with Dennis and Viv Busby, and I signed the forms, and he said, we're going to do a little bit of a press conference now. And he says, you've done one before, haven't you? And I looked at him and I says, yeah, we do it all the time, you know. And he says, oh, okay, then, yeah, we'll go in and I'll speak first. And then you'll probably get asked a couple of questions. No bother, like. So we walked out of his office down a little corridor into another room. And then walked in the room, Dennis first. And I was there, and I think I had a jacket on and a tie. And there's the BBC camera set up. There's the Tyne Tees camera set up. There's a row of press behind. And I just went, slight difference here along the line, you know. So that was the difference. We talk about big clubs and little clubs. Now I'm not too keen on that. Both fantastic clubs. I was a lucky lad signing for both clubs. But that was the difference. That he straight away at Sunderland struck me, and it was a different level of gear.
Yeah. So we've actually got a question from one of the lads as well, Will. You mentioned about obviously you've played at Hillsborough a couple of times. The one that we just showed before there against Norwich in the FA Cup, and I think we all remember. I think it was a league game against Sheffield Wednesday. I don't like to mention these things like Tony, but I was just wondering, can you remember what happened in that game? It's an easy one for Norman.
I can. It was a easy one for Norman. And do you know what? In a funny sort of way, I'm glad you've asked it. And for the simple reason is, now, it's the fourth round of the FA Cup. After that game, Malcolm Crosby got sacked. And it was one of those instances, it was a cross came over from my right. The ball came in. I backpedaled just like I've exactly the same spot as the same situation of the Norwich game. Ball came, the ball hung a little bit, tried to catch it there, the ball dropped. And who was it? Was it Mark Bright who was just stood
Right.
there, went bink, thanks very much.
Yeah.
We lost the game 1-0. Malcolm got sacked. And at the time, it was one of those things where people had reminded me. And I can remember I used to get quite a lot. I remember the time, do you remember Sheffield Wednesday? And it used to grind on me, you know. And I used to think, flipping heck, I've played how many thousands of minutes of football. But over the years, actually worked it out. And I thought, well, if we're all human beings, you're going to make a mistake. I, on that day, made a mistake. You know, if I saw Malcolm Crosby, we'd laugh about it. You know, that type thing. You know, but all I knew is the way I actually finally came to going, hang on, we're human. And
Yeah,
we are, you know.
yeah,
All I knew is every time I went on a football pitch, I give 100%. So I
yeah,
can live with anything that went on during a game or after games, because if a player gives his best, you can't do any
yeah.
more. But thanks for bringing it up anyway.
You've got to think though, Howie, Tony. You know what we're like as supporters, man. I think we use that as a term of endearment now more than out else, to be honest with you. So yeah, we've got a good group of fans. Anyway, so you talked about your appearances there, and you made over 670 career appearances. So obviously you faced a ton of different players. Can you tell us who was the best opposing player that you faced?
Yeah, on that one, if I could come out with names, but with respect to all footballers, the person I'd look at the time to give respect to, I know it sounds a bit of a flippant answer, be the one with the football at the time.
Hmm.
Simple as I couldn't care less who he was, whether he came from a non-league club, first game, or he was an international superstar. All I know is if somebody kicks that football at you,
Hmm.
they can all kick it as hard. So it players wise, yeah, I played against players who had the names, you know, but I never went, oh, so and so's playing for them today.
Hmm.
You mentioned our Phil before. Phil would know everybody what stars I played against. But for myself, I even thought about it. I just went out and played the
Hmm.
game, and if somebody had the ball, they were the threat of the day, you know.
Yeah. So who was the so this is well kind of segue to the next question really. Who was there any players that you actually didn't like playing against who were a little bit nasty, or come with a reputation, that kind of thing? Anybody you kept an eye on?
Um, I don't think I never. I used to look. I'd be lying if I said I never looked at the opposing team. And on
Hmm.
some occasions, you'd look at a team and you knew what was coming your way. Um, I can go back years ago when I was a young lad playing for Hull City, and we played Bradford. And it was a little bit of, I suppose, of a local derby-ish, or as Bradford as Hull can get. And up front, they had a lad called Bobby Campbell. Well, you knew what you were going to get from Bobby straight away. And from the first minute of the game, all they did was get the ball wide, knock it in, bang. Get it wide, knock it in, bang. I think he broke my nose in the first 20 minutes.
Oh Lord.
And but he just kept coming. He just kept coming and he just kept coming. And you knew what was going on, but the referee he just kept letting it go. And at half time, Brian Orton, who was the Hull manager, had a right go at the ref. Are you going to do anything about that? And
Hmm.
the ref said, "Oh, whatever." Yeah, but it went on and it went on, and all you just keep telling yourself, "Here we go, the ball's wide. Here it comes." You give the shout, keeper, bang, and it was just one of them afternoons. After the game, we didn't get beat, but after the game, the referee blew his whistle. Bobby Campbell walked straight up to me, shook my hand, and he said, "Tony, well played." And every time I played against him, never ever happened again. Never. And it just goes to show he must have thought enough's enough. He's just going to
Hmm.
keep coming anyway. I can pummel him, but he's still going to keep coming for the ball. So that's just, yeah. So he was one. I think used to quite have a little lookout when we were playing against Bobby, just in
Oh.
case I'd have one of them afternoons of getting battered again, you know. So, but yeah,
There's a couple of comments here then. So, well, what I wanted to mention as well, we had Richie Pitt, who's just been on as well. He was obviously the '73 FA Cup final winner. He's which is nice. He said, "Great interview, Tony." There's a comment on here from a lad called Chris Chilton. He says, "I remember Tony Norman knocking on my door after you arrested my sister who had been shoplifting. So that's kind of like, and then there's a
Get
question from our
away.
mate. There's a question from our mate Graham out in Arizona. Is there a particular goal scored against you that really stands out? He's asking.
Hello, Graham, by the way. Good to hear from him. Any goal that stands out, in all honesty, probably everyone, because I hated it. Obviously, you can see some. Oh, I don't know why that just sprung to mind. There's some you hate, and I don't know why this is coming to my head as I was thinking there. Wembley Stadium, Swindon at home, playoff final. McLaughlin picking the ball up, and he took a shot, and he was outside the box, and as he hit it, already you're thinking, I was going away to my right. I was thinking, oh, no problem whatsoever. And Benno stuck a leg out, and it looped up. I'd gone down to my right, and it was like slow motion as the ball just spiraled. I could see him spinning away, and it dropped into, and we lost 1-0. And that reason that stuck in my mind, and because it was one of them goals. He just big game, and it was a pokey goal to concede. So yeah, that's irritating.
To be fair, I'm not just saying this because you're online. I think you're the only person that showed up for the Sunderland team that day. You made about at least a dozen absolutely sublime saves in that game, and it was always going to be a crap goal like that one that went in, because you were totally on your game that day. And I think a lot of the lads, I'm not sure whether they were just in awe or stage struck or whatever. Just it didn't seem to be. The effort was there. It just the team just didn't gel in that game, and it was obviously very disappointing for all of us that made the trip down to Wembley for that game. But it is what it is. We've got some other comments on here as well. Let's have a look on here. There's some I cannot mention. I think your brother Rob Norman's listening as well. He says he's actually having a barbecue right now, and he says, "Go on, lad," which is canny. And then Rushy's asking a question here again. So. Rush is saying that he rated Brian Atkinson really high. If you were manager, would you buy him if you had the cash, and why? What did you think of Whitehurst?
I'm going to go. You asked about Brian Atkinson there,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Going back to when I said I watched the as I said to you, Degsy, I watched the Chelsea game. The second half of that, the replay of the quarter final, and I've not really watched much of the games I used to play in since I retired, and I watched that game, and I was taken aback by, not because Rushy's been on your program today with messages, but I was struck by Brian Atkinson and David Rush. The work rate every time that ball dropped in midfield, one of them would be, I used to call it ratting, like all the time. They'd be rattling at your heels. Absolutely awful to play against, I could imagine. And they were fantastic, And going back to what you say about Brian Atkinson, and looking at, for example, talking again about both the players who scored against West Ham away, David Rush. Who crossed the goal for Gordon Armstrong in the quarter final? Brian Atkinson. Which two players combined for making of the goal, John Burns' goal in the semi-final? David Rush linking in Brian Atkinson. And you watch that cross from Brian Atkinson. Unbelievable. The way the ball's bobbed, 2 bounces, bomb, and he's clipped it. But Bernie didn't have to move. Fantastic, and great credit to them lads. I think the commentator made a point actually about Rushy, saying they had no fear, and they didn't. All the young lads, you could put one of the young lads in the team. and you didn't have to keep an eye on him today at all. They were just they were great young lads with ability, but commitment was fantastic.
Mm-hmm. What did you think of Billy Whitehurst then?
You asked me. Yeah, that's the one. Put it this way: if we had a five-a-side, and I had and I was picking a team, my first pick would be Billy Whitehurst, without one shadow of a doubt, because I ain't daft. But Billy was Billy did a job for the
Mm-hmm.
team. He was his own character, as hard as nails. He would give again. It comes down. I'll probably mention during the course of this, he gave 100%. I know for a fact I wouldn't have liked to have played against him. I mentioned Bobby Campbell
Mm-hmm.
before,
Yeah.
but Billy played to win.
Mm-hmm.
As simple as he was a handful. He'd battle with you. He'd fight with you. He'd give you all a great player to have on your side.
Mm-hmm. That's class. So during the 7 seasons with Sunderland, you've obviously played experienced highs and lows. We mentioned before promotion, relegation, FA Cup final. So over those years, you've lined up with some absolute quality players, and these include like Gatesy, Gabby Deeney, Ruben Agbula, Paul Bracewell. Ruben says to say hi, by the way. Davenport, Kevin Ball, John Byrne, Pask as well. Who think the best Sunderland player you've played alongside and why?
Now then, the during my time at Sunderland, I would say the best player or the best players I played with, I can honestly say everyone that went on that pitch, because we were in an era where everybody gave 100%. I mentioned before, if I went on the pitch, I would give everything, whether it's
Mhm,
getting a bang in the face, whatever. You, and that's the team we had at the time, and that's why we played in the FA Cup final, because
mhm,
everybody they give 100%, whether they're Kevin Ball, whether they're Gary Bennett, Gordon Armstrong, Marco Gabardini, Eric Gates, Paul Bracewell. I mean, and these are that people will remember. Having
mhm.
said that, on the flip side, I would say I can. You might not remember Degsy. We had a local County Durham lad called Mickey Heathcote, centre half.
Yeah, I
I
remember.
think
He
he
had a
might
nice
have played
tash.
for Spennymoor in the yeah. Yeah, Mickey Heathcote, and
Yeah.
occasionally he'd play centre half. Now, if
Mhm,
somebody said to me, if he wore the number 5 shirt, and on that day somebody said to me, "Who's the best number 5? Who's your best number 5?" I'd go Mickey Heathcote, because he was the lad, just like what I've been saying about all the boys. Then he would give
mhm,
100%. Um,
mhm,
which in any team to have any success, if you've got a group of lads that will do that week in, week out, you've got a chance. But in answer to your question, and to be fair to it, mate, and you're asking for a best player or favourite player, I've been asked this before, and it was you that asked me, and I'm going to come with the same answer, because I'm going to say I'll mention a player that nobody would even think of, and that's John Kay.
mhm,
And because when I originally got asked the question by yourself, I knew that
mhm,
question was coming, and I sat at home thinking about it. And
mhm,
as I was going through players, the likes of Kevin Ball, Gary Bennett, I thought about John Kay, and there was two things about why I say him. One, same reason, 100%.
mhm,
100% commitment, no ego, nothing. He'd turn up on a football pitch, he would give you anything. But on the flip side, for some unknown reason, when you're away from the game, and we were on little trips or tours or whatever, and you mentioned John. When I started to think about John Kay, I always ended up laughing about something he'd either done or said. He was just a great lad. No big time Charlie. He came, he did his job, but great in the dressing room.
Oh, that's class. Obviously, we've got a lot of good memories of him as well when he did the old Hawaii 5-0 off the field after he'd broken his leg as well at Roker Park. That was just sublime. Yeah, unbelievable. Unbelievable, lad. So obviously, I mean, again, you've played the Welsh national team alongside the likes of Gary Speed, Giggs, Mark Hughes, obviously Andy Melville, Southall, Chris Coleman, Ian Rush, Dean Saunders, all phenomenal players. So from a national team standpoint, who was the best player in the Welsh national team and why?
Um, I'll name two. One, I think you know what I'm going to say anyway, in the sense that for the background of the team would be Neville Southall, and that would be on the pitch and off the pitch. So I have to mention him because at the time, at one time, my opinion was he was probably the best in the world. Arguably the best, and I thought he was. And when I was involved in the dressing room with him, if he spoke, everybody would listen. It was 100%. The other player was at the time I was involved with the squad, and it was they kept mentioning a young lad called Ryan, and I didn't. I've got to be honest, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know who the heck they were on about. And he's 16, and they used to talk, and the manager used to. You could hear the manager talking with the senior lads, Rushy, Mark Hughes, Neville, saying, "Do you think he's old enough?" They would
Mm-hmm.
get him in, and I still didn't
Mm-hmm.
know who this lad was. And then one day I went training. We were at Wrexham, and this skinny young lad, whether he was 16, 17, I don't know, came, and they put him in the squad. This lad, Ryan Giggs, and I just went, "Oh, there's been a bit of fuss about him." Well, we had a seven-a-side game amongst the teams. There's your two teams. So everybody was going, give him the ball. They give him the ball, and off he went. And had the ball at his feet, and he could run. I would say maybe not flat out, but almost flat out with the ball at his feet, and just the ball wouldn't move. It'd just be, and off he'd go. And it was like, whoa! I'd never seen anybody do it. Any player, and he do it. He had the ability to do it. And then it was only years later, and everybody that's been like watched football will remember a goal Ryan scored against Chelsea for Man United, and I think it was a cup game where he picked the ball up. I think it was in his own half, and off he went, and he did exactly the
I think it might have
same,
been Arsenal,
ball at the
Tony.
feet, and the balance with the ball.
I think it was Arsenal. I think. Sorry.
It was Arsenal. I don't know where.
I
Yeah,
think
it
it
was.
was.
It was
Yeah.
Arsenal. No, it
Yeah.
was Arsenal. Yeah, and off he went, and Dave Seaman was in goal, and he rifled it into the top of the net.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievable, great skill.
It was phenomenal. So obviously, as I said, you played for the national team. Obviously, Hull City. So you Race Course Ground before Bootham Crescent, Roker Park. What about so that I want to talk about Stadia football grounds. Where's the worst and best grounds that you've played in?
That obviously in my day, Degsy, it was we played. It's in the era of playing at Gig Lane, Bury, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
not saying no disrespect to any of the grounds I name, but I can remember playing at Spotland, Rochdale, um, and we had a league game, and it was in the days where after what a month, 6 weeks, the 6 yard box would be no grass, and if it rained, it would be mud. And I can remember playing at Rochdale, and the mud was literally up to my ankles. It was just it was just bizarre. It wouldn't happen in this day.
Mm-hmm.
But we used to play it. And I think at one time, I used to try and work it out. I think because Hull at the time dropped down into the old fourth division, they had a spell in the third, second, and obviously then when I was at Sunderland, we had a spell in the Premiership, or the first division as it was then, second division. I think I worked out of all before they started building new grounds, I think I played in all the old grounds, Crewe Alexander, all of those type grounds. So, so want of a better word, I've seen the sights, Degsy, put it that way.
Mm-hmm. It looks like you're Pete Norman's put on there. Kate wants to know why Grandad's on the telly.
well, well, to be fair to her, she probably they haven't got a they won't know, will they? You know, so
Yeah,
they won't.
uh,
It's a different world, a different era. Bless them. So
I know, I
there you
get it.
go.
So I've got moving on to something that's actually really close to my heart for sure. Beating the scum at St James's Park in the playoffs, promotion to the First Division, the '92 FA Cup final, all memorable moments for us. But what was your most memorable moment as a Sunderland player?
Well, I'm going to say an easy cop out, and I'm going to say a little bit of all the three games, the two Wembley games,
Mm-hmm.
um, and the playoff against Newcastle. To
Mm-hmm.
get rid of the first, both Wembley games, I don't remember for the actual final because it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
brilliant memories because we lost both. Um, but I think the first Wembley appearance, Swindon, I remember it because it was a dream of any player to play at Wembley, and I
Mm-hmm.
ended up playing there. So that was a big tick in the old in the box, if you like. The second game, all the memories came, or the second game at Wembley, the FA Cup final. Now that is a boy's dream, but I remember it for the reasons we've spoke about. I remember it for the quarter final game, the atmosphere against Chelsea at home. I remember the semi final, that even the West Ham game prior to the Chelsea game, the atmosphere at Upton Park, playing in those
Mm-hmm.
games. You look back at the crowds in those games, and it was
Mm-hmm.
obviously not. It wasn't seating, and people were shoulder to shoulder. It was jam packed, and the atmosphere. It was just something special.
Mm-hmm.
The other game I remember, obviously, is when we beat Newcastle in the semi final of the playoffs, and
Mm-hmm.
that obviously local derby, and we had the first leg, and 0-0. As everybody will be shouting at the telly now, saying, "Oh, 0-0, whatever." Yeah, and we missed a penalty. Paul Hardiman took it. John Burridge saved it. Paul Hardiman gets sent off, and the melee that follows. But something struck me on that. So it's 0-0 now. For everybody that went to Roker Park, when you went down the tunnel, the corridor split two ways. So you turned right to the other end of the stand. Under the stand was the away dressing room. You turned left to the far end of the stand, and it was the home dressing room. Now, bearing in mind, we had the home advantage. We'd missed a penalty. We're going down the tunnel. We split, walk into this dressing room, our dressing room, and all you could hear was "woo" coming from the Newcastle lads walking down, and they were whooping, they were hollering, they were, in my opinion, they're giving it a little bit large, to be honest, and they think they've done the business, but to me, absolutely no chance, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And we went in the dressing room, and Dennis Smith, the manager, and Viv. Viv was going, come on, lads, come on. They're saying things like, well, we're not out yet and what have you. And Dennis was gutted, to be honest. And he just stood there, shaking his head. Well, and I don't know why. I was quite a quiet lad in the dressing room, but I thought I felt it, and I just said to him, I says, I'll tell you something now, and I says, and I mean this. We'll go there and we'll win. And I was 100% in my head confident. One, because it was still 0-0. Two, because they thought they'd won. They thought they'd done the hard bit. But I knew from a Sunderland point of view, we had an ability to dig in, and digging we did. Of course, the rest, isn't it? We go there, foul night, the pitch was soaked, and we go there, and we obviously ended up winning 2-0, and 4 minutes to go. Again, little things stick in your mind is when the Gallagher end, they all invaded the pitch. And as they were coming on the pitch, all the players started running for the referee went, get in, get inside, like, and everybody started running in. And but I don't know what was the matter with me, and I thought, I ain't running. I'm not running, I'm walking. I'm not, running off the pitch. So I started walking, and then all these Newcastle lads were running past me. And when I thought about it a couple of days later, I think, how the heck I never got, Lord knows, But I didn't run. I kept walking, and the referee at the time was George Courtney, and I admired him. One thing he did that day is because we never went into the dressing rooms. We stayed in there outside the dressing room area and where the tunnel is. And we were waiting to see what had happened. And everybody was, we were winning. I think there was something daft. 4 minutes to go. And George Courtney, when the noise subsided and what have you, he just said, gentlemen, he said, I'll tell you now, if we're here till midnight, so be it, but we will finish the game. And you could literally see the Newcastle lads, their last hope had just gone, and their shoulders just went, they sagged. And we knew then, 4 minutes with our lads, it was ours. Yeah. That's all we had to do, just battle, and that was it. So, yeah, great result, great night.
Oh, superb. So going back to the FA Cup as well, you had 2 man of the match performances leading up to the cup final. So I think you were man of the match against West Ham and also Chelsea. And you obviously made some sublime saves in that game. What was your most memorable save, and can you actually talk us through it?
There's a save, yeah. The West Ham game. I'll pick the West Ham game. A funny game. How can I describe it? Okay, the game started. It's one of them games, and I was chuntering onto myself. Right, here we go. Come on, keep it tight, whatever, as you do. And the game was going on, and a couple of saves were made, and then a lad I never really knew much of, a lad called Tim Breaker, picked the ball up, and he was 10 yards outside the box, and he's had a touch, and he's let a shot go, and for some, I don't remember much about games. You just go out and you play. But your question's quite odd, really, because I do remember it. And he hit a ball, and the ball had no. The ball. What I remember about it. One, I didn't have time to get a step in. Yeah, without being technical, I couldn't get that step in to try and go with my left hand, and I've literally gone. As the ball's mid-flight, I realised I had absolutely no chance with me bottom hand, left hand, and I had to go top hand, right hand. And all I've done, and all I can remember seeing is this ball, and it wasn't spinning. It had no spin, and it was just the same ball panel just kept coming. It was just weird, and I've just gone right hand, top hand, and I've stretched for the ball, got it, and the ball's gone away. Because as I'm going for it, my thoughts are, I'm in trouble here. You daft things, I'm in trouble here. So I had to stretch top hand, right hand, and everybody afterwards said, oh, Tom, brilliant, like great save. And at the time, it was probably not technically brilliant, but it was all I could do at the time to keep it out. So I do remember that one.
I think having watched the back, Tony, online a few times, I think the commentator cites your age. He says as a 30, he's basically 34, not out, pretty much. He mentioned that for a 34-year-old, that was a phenomenal save. I think that's what the commentator said anyway. So there you go. At 34, flying across the goal like that. Fantastic, man. So over your career, you've obviously worked with some fantastic managers as well. Brian Horton, Dennis Smith. You've worked with some average managers too. I'm not going to mention other people. Terry Yorath as well. Then you were with Crosby, Butcher, Mick Buxton. Who was the best manager that you played under and why?
The best manager was all the managers that signed me. No, it's you're always gonna pick a manager that you felt comfortable with. Suppose you look back and say successful with. Now, and I just said there a little bit of flippancy in it, saying your favourite managers will be managers that signed you. I do remember Dennis Smith signed me, but he was a really good manager. Having said that, I'm a firm believer. If you're in charge of a team, the most important thing as a manager is to have good backroom staff. And Dennis at the time had a great number two in Viv Busby. Brian Orton, his spell at Hull City, he had Dennis Booth, and they work as a team. And if you've got that in a club, the number twos, if you like, and the backroom staff can take all the weight off a manager, twofold, if you like. But Dennis was a great manager. He looked after his players, and you respected that. So Dennis was one of my favourites. Malcolm, obviously, when he took over, completely different. What I liked about Malcolm was during the cup run, he did things. He was in charge of. He used to run the hostel for all the young players on Sunderland front. So to break one of the morning's training would be, come in, you don't need your boots, lads, put your training shoes on, we'll go for a run. And we used to go for a run along the seafront, round the back to the Charlie Early Centre, the training ground. But on the way, we'd stop off at his hostel, and his wife Carol used to do bacon and sausage sandwiches for lads. So we'd just sit, all the young lads, the senior pros, the young pros, sit there having a sandwich, and it was just little things to keep the bond amongst the players together, and it worked.
No, that sounds class. So do you like international career as well? So what was it actually like playing for your country?
I think out of all the out of everything that happened in a football career, I have to say getting selected and actually playing for my country was the proudest thing I've done. And I say that because really it was because of my dad. And as I say, I was born and bred in Wales. And I knew when I got. I'll tell you a little story actually. I played for Hull City on a Saturday, and there wasn't a hint of me getting into the Wales team or squad, if you like. We had Neville, who was playing. We had Eddie Niedzwiecki from Chelsea, who was his number 2. We had Andy Dibble, who played. Martin Thomas had played. Tony Roberts was in there, and on a Sunday morning after the Saturday game, my dad, like he used to do, had phoned me up. And his first question would invariably be, "Everybody okay?" "Yes, Dad, everybody's fine." "How'd the game go yesterday?" And it's all you said about the game. Anyway, on this Sunday morning, my dad phoned up and he goes, "Have you had any phone calls?" And bit odd. And I said, "No, I've had no phone calls." He says, "Well, I'll get off the phone. You're going to get one." He goes, "Mike England's been on to me." He says, he's trying to get your number to speak to you. Mike England being the manager of the Welsh squad at that time. So anyway, put the phone down. 10 minutes later, my phone went again. "Hello, Tony, it's Mike England." And I said, "Hello, Mike. Yeah, nice to hear from you." He goes, "Tony," he goes, Andy Dibble's injured." And I went, "All right, yeah." He goes, "Martin Thomas is injured." And I went, "All right, okay." He goes, "And then we've got Eddie." He goes, "Eddie's injured." So I go, "All right, okay." He goes, "Tony, it's Neville's all right." He says, "But he can't get there till." I still didn't have he hadn't mentioned any games or what have you. Or he goes, "Neville can't get there till Tuesday." And I went, "Okay, right." He goes, "Is there any chance you can get and meet up with us at Manchester Airport tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely, no bother, you know." I said, "That's great." He goes, "Fantastic, Tony. Great talking to you." And he's just about to go. And then he goes, he goes, "One thing, Tony." And I says, "What's that?" He goes, "You are Welsh, aren't you?"
Brilliant. So, so what you mentioned, I mean,
So
you
there you
mentioned
go. So,
a
yeah.
slew of
So, but
quality keepers. Sorry, mate. You mentioned a slew of quality keepers. What was it like to compete against Neville Southall for the number 1 spot? I mean, having met you a couple of times and stuff, and talked to you, obviously you're a very ambitious player, very driven. And then you come up against this phenom that is Neville Southall. What was it like to compete with him and push him for that starting spot in the team?
um, from a training and a playing point of view, nothing was different. You were in a different environment, you were with a different team. So all you do is do what you do. You train 100%. If you're asked to play, you play 100%. I never felt I was competing with him, to be honest, because he was my roommate, and I looked at it more as a way of we worked together. We were the 2 keepers that travelled all around Europe together.
Mhm.
Everything we did was together. We trained together. If we went to walk around various cities, we did it together. So,
Mhm.
and I look, I took it as a learning curve. I mentioned before how you learn off various people, and Neville, I said from the start, was somebody I learned uh,
Mhm.
alongside with, and again, you talk about how things work out. I mentioned there about getting called up to the Wales squad. And obviously, I've mentioned various goalkeepers there who were above me in the pecking order. Um, so I turned up. I thought, "Oh, it's my one and only
Mhm.
squad membership call up. I may as well enjoy it, learn what I can, and go with the flow." And we were playing the Republic of Ireland at Lansdowne Road. And prior to the game, like I said, me and Neville we went out on the pitch, and the pitch it looked like they just played rugby on it and left it. They hadn't rolled it. They hadn't done anything. They hadn't done anything with it, and it had divots. And we walked out, and we went straight into the goal mouth as you do, and it was poor. You know, for international, it was poor. And Nev just turned to me. He says, "Do you know what?" He says, "Do you know what I might do today? Strap my ankles on here." And I went, "All right, okay, yeah." You know, that's how he was thinking, looking at the pitch. And anyway, so I was there. I watched the first half. It was 0-0, and this is nice. Second half, Neville went up to catch the ball in the area, landed, and his ankle literally turned. And the result being he dislocated and broke his ankle there and then. And I ended up not only getting that strange call up to the Welsh team, I ended up actually getting my first cap. And as I was running on the pitch, I'm going back to how I knew my dad would be listening on the radio. So I knew he'd be listening to the commentator going, Tony Norman's on the pitch to get capped for his country, and it was it was a great feeling, you know, and it was a special moment.
So obviously you had 5 caps as well, Tony. So was that your most memorable moment? Obviously making your debut. Was there other things that happened in the other 4 caps that you remember?
Yeah, we I mean, I can name the 4 caps off by heart. We played Republic. Here we go. I'll probably get it wrong now. We played the first one, Republic of Ireland, where I went on as sub. We drew 0-0. The other games were Italy away, Uruguay, who were then just been crowned the South American champions. So that was a good game to get. That was at Wrexham. The other 2 games were Malta away and Canada away. 2 little stories. One story with the Italy game away. It was when Ian Rush had just come back to England from a spell playing in Italy, playing for Juventus. So he was playing in the Welsh team, obviously. So when we got onto the pitch and they announced the teams, Rushy was getting a little bit of hammer. Of course, Italy, we're Wales, we're playing against the Italians. Rushy's getting stick. And the game stuck in my mind because one, we ended up winning the game 1-0. And 2, Ian Rush scored the winner. Oh, the Italians weren't impressed, by the way. The other game was Uruguay, and we played. Bearing in mind they're the South American champions. I mean, they play on pitches that are immaculate. They knock the ball around for fun, and we played at Wrexham in the middle of winter, and the pitch was like 2 inches of mud, and you could not play on that. You couldn't play football. It was one of them games. If it hadn't have been an international and Uruguay hadn't have travelled, they would have called it off. But the game was played, and we ended up drawing 0-0, which for us, to be fair, it was a great result. And we're coming off the pitch at the end, and we're walking, and we're delighted, you know, and the Uruguayans are just coming off. They're shaking their heads, you know, what the heck are we doing playing there like that on that pitch? And as we're turning into the 2 dressing rooms, it was quiet. We shook hands. Kevin Ratcliffe, the Welsh captain, shouted out, "Lads, come on, heads up. We would have murdered them on a good pitch." Oh, that was just summed it up, you know, it was brilliant. So, you know.
Class. So going back to your playing careers again, club level. Other than Sunderland and Hull, which clubs would you really wanted to play for that you didn't already represent?
Um, I've, it's one of them questions, Degsy. To be honest, I don't honestly know. You look back and I mean, the team I used to support, if you like, was Everton, because I lived in North Wales, the top northeast corner of North Wales. The nearest two big teams were Liverpool and Everton on Merseyside. So I suppose you say, I wonder what it'd be like to play for them one day. But I never really hankered to play for any particular team. I never crossed my mind once in my career. I'd love to play for them. Because I ended up really playing at all the main grounds against the top teams, if you like, in this country. I went to a lot of international grounds, played against or I played against the teams that I've mentioned there with the Welsh team, but I've been to a lot of grounds and sat on benches against lots of teams, Germany, the Netherlands, as they were then. And if it's just, but to actually want to go and play for somebody, no, I didn't. I played for a couple of teams, and I look at myself as being fortunate. Want to play the game and make a career out of it, but to have, when you come away from a team and have good memories for playing for that team, there's got to be a bonus and something you cherish, really.
Well, you mentioned before there, Tony, about your career and at the end of your career getting involved in coaching. Do you have any coaching successes that you can share with us?
Um, um, I don't know. I've been lucky enough to take a couple of lads that have done well in the game. I'm gonna, I mean, you could come out. Here we go on the name thing again. I mean, I had spells coaching at Sunderland and Middlesbrough, and I coached while I was at Middlesbrough. I had Bryn Jones, and who went on to play for Feyenoord, I think, and they won that Dutch league and what have you. Ross Turnbull, I took a few times. Ross went on to moved to Chelsea. And to be fair to Ross, he came back on one occasion when we were doing a football school over a holiday period, myself and Mark Bell. And Ross came down and he brought his medals from Chelsea, and he had league medals and European medals, fantastic, really. And then on the Sunderland front, you had a 14-year-old Jordan Pickford, and I'll never ever say, oh yeah, I coached Jordan Pickford, for the simple reason I never ever took him one-to-one. He was at that time in the academy, and he was in a group. I'd coach a group, so I would never turn around and say, oh yeah, I coached Jordan Pickford. Yes, I had him in a group, and I was aware of him, obviously. So that was one that went on to better things. There's one lad, for example, you talk about you have success with. I joined Sunderland to do the academy, and they were thinking about releasing a lad, Ben Wilson, and I went there, and I had three keepers. And I took all three, and Ben was one of them. And he'd been on the exit trials down at Leeds because they were going to release him from the academy. And I took him in. Kevin Ball said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Well, I wouldn't release him. I'd keep him. He's got certain things." And it's one of them where, because then the group, as a coach, your group is then one-to-one or one-to-two, or at tops 1 to 3 keepers. So you get to know a keeper, you get to know what they're thinking, and then you get to know how they're thinking, why they're thinking, how to change the way they think, and it comes a different ball game. And I love that side of it. And I got to know Ben, the way he ticked, what would get him at it and what didn't. If he wasn't at it, I'd never stop it. And I hope he doesn't mind me saying, and say, and give him, for want of a better phrase, give him a bollocking, waste of time. I just turn around and I go, right, lads, that'll do. I'd walk off, I would win. And he hated it because then it was it was like, oh, flipping heck, he's not speaking to me. I've not, and then I'd be guaranteed next time that he'd be coming in. I wouldn't speak to him. I go, morning, lads, you all right? I wouldn't speak to him. Just go out and say, right, lads, what we're doing. But I'd know from then on, he'd give 100%. Session had finished, and I go, Ben, well done. And he'd, it's just, I loved it from a coaching point of view, getting onto the one-to-one basis where you know what makes keepers tick. Fantastic. I loved it.
That's brilliant, man. We've actually got a question from Paulie, our friend Paul down in West Palm Beach. He asked, which other clubs tried to sign you when you were at Sunderland?
First, hello, Paul. How you doing? Hope you get over that shyness, mate. To be honest, I don't really know. I knew when I was at Hull, there was teams because Brian Orton came in, and he used to tell me, he used to say, he used to call me in, I need a chat with you. I used to go in the office. He said, so and so wants you. You can't go. Oh, thanks very much, Gaffer. Yeah, off you go, And then a month down the line, so and so wants to sign you. They're interested in you. You can't go. The chairman once stopped me when I was coming off the training pitch. And he said, oh, Tony, okay. And he said, he came straight out with it. So and so have offered so many pounds for you. He says, you're not going for peanuts. That was the end of that conversation. And so I knew when I was at Hull, I knew the teams were looking, I didn't know, for example, Sunderland had been watching me. I didn't at all until the first time I knew about Sunderland's interest was we played a game at Boothby Park on Boxing Day. And I had, my parents were at the game. Obviously, my family were at the game. And after the game, we didn't get beat, and everybody was upbeat. It was a Boxing Day game. We had Christmas. We didn't. We had the next day off. Fantastic. Went in the players' lounge. Everybody was saying, "Oh, bit of a respite from the football," because obviously we trained Christmas Day, played Boxing Day. And as I was talking to the family, one of the young lads, I don't know whether they were apprentices then or YTS lads, came up to me and in the players' lounge, and he just says, "Tony, the manager wants to see you." And it was the manager at that time was Eddie Gray, the former Leeds player. And I said, "All right, okay." So I knocked on the door, the manager's office, and he says, "Tony, come in, sit down." He said, "Listen, Tony," he said, "we've had an offer for you that the club have accepted. Now it's up to you what you do with it. But tomorrow morning, we're going to go. I'll come with you. We're going to meet up on the motorway or just off the motorway with the other party. You can have a chat, see what you think. Again, yeah, we're happy with it. We've agreed the terms, but it's in your court, And I says, no bother. And he says, okay. He says, I'll meet you tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock at Wetherby. And I said, yeah, that's great. And I got up to go, and I turned around, and he says, any questions? And I got to the door, and I turned around, and I says, yeah, I've got one question. He goes, yeah, go on, fire away. I said, what club is it? And he goes, oh, yeah, it's Sunderland. And that's no word of a lie. So the following morning, off we went. I met up at Wetherby, at the hotel at Wetherby, with Eddie Gray. Went up to the Tontine off the A19, where Billy White and Ian Esford were having talks with Eddie Gray. Bob Murray was there, the chairman, Dennis Smith, and the secretary from Sunderland. and I had my talks, and obviously the two lads going the other way had their talks.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, quite bizarre, really. But that was football. If you were going to get a
Yeah.
move, that's how quick it happened, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, bizarre.
Well, Will's asking if you had any, difficult experiences getting to or back from a match. Anything that you remember?
To or getting back from a match.
Yeah.
No, I don't really know. I can remember. I can remember not getting back. I used to hate. I used to hate the worst journeys ever travelling back from a match was if we got beat. Now they were
Mm.
long journeys and horrible journeys, you know. But difficulties of getting back, I can't think of any. You know, you just
Yeah.
it was all part of the football life. You could go
Mm-hmm.
back from anywhere, the south coast, Portsmouth, 5 hours back or whatever, 6 hours. Um, you know, it was. But talking about travel with football, the biggest surprise I got, we travelled obviously when I was travelling with Hull on the east coast there, not even as far up as Sunderland, and we'd be travelling back doing bus trips 4 or 5 hours on the way back. And after I joined Sunderland, one of the first games we had was Bournemouth away. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll never forget when we were travelling down to Bournemouth, and they were saying, "Right, meet up, lads, and we'll get the coach to the airport." And I was going, "What's that all about?" You know. And I was staying in a hotel at the time at Durham, and we played what would have been like an 8 hour journey. And I was back in Durham City in the hotel we were staying at after the game at 8 o'clock. It was just ridiculous. It was one of those situations where the plane's ready when you want to get on, lads. You know, you put the kit on. Right, we're all on 1, 2, 3, 4. The team's on. Whoever
Mm-hmm.
else was travelling with us for the game, we're on. Right, lads. Yeah, we're all here. Pilot, set it off, and off we go. Brilliant, you know. So just a complete difference. And one of them differences, Degsy, we say the difference was between Sunderland and Hull City at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Rushy was asking as well, who was the fastest over 100 meters in pre-season? And he says, if his memory serves him right, the thought would be Gabby Adini, but he is pretty sure a certain goalkeeper won.
Now, do you remember when you asked me that question before about Sheffield Wednesday? And I went, thank question. Now then, Degsy, I can honestly mean this. Thanks for that question. But yeah, no, what we did, pre-season training, what they did, we used to do one particular training day would be repetitions of 400 meters, 200 meters, 100 meters, and you'd get split or paired off on particular distances. And on this day, it was I got paired with Gabbers, didn't I? And of course, you just who's this 32-year-old or whatever turned up at the club pre-season, and Gabbers, and we had 100 yard sprint, and obviously whoever's asked this question knows what happened. But we had a sprint, and it was a good sprint, to be honest. You know, it was, but I shaded it. You know, I shaded it, and I think it at the time it shocked a few people. You know, keepers were keepers and not supposed to be able to run. You
Yeah.
know, but yeah, it was still part of training anyway. So you just did it. So it was one of them races where you come out, you win it, but everybody loved it, didn't they? But
Of
the
course.
lads, so poor Marco, I should say, the lads tortured him, as you can imagine.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
they give him grief. they give him grief for ages. You know, Gabbers. So that was it then. From then on, it was Gabbers. We thought you were quick. You know, you said you were quick, and he just they wouldn't let it go, the lads. But all good fun, all good fun. I lost him completely. Yeah. People probably see me. Nice throws. What happens when you're in Milwaukee? Nah, he's gone. Please contact the screen systems. Who? I know. I've lost him. That's him on the phone. I jump back on. Okay.